Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a place where the wind bites like a blade, the bread could chip your teeth, and the very idea of comfort sounds like a faraway dream. Welcome to medieval Scotland, where surviving one day feels like winning a lottery you didn't even buy a ticket for. Imagine the air so damp your bones feel wet, the ground so cold it might as well hate you, and neighbors who'd rather rob your chickens than greet you. There's danger, desperation, and the ever-present aroma of someone boiling cabbage way too long. You're not a noble, you're not a knight, you're just you, some unlucky soul born into a brutal century, dragging your itchy tunic through the muck of clan rivalries and very questionable hygiene practices. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is where you're watching from. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in the dark, not because it's especially early, but because windows, as you know them, don't really exist. There's a hole in the wall, that's it. A ragged animal skin hangs over it, letting in just enough grayish light to remind you it's another day to stay alive. The floor is packed earth, cold and uneven. You've slept barely on a straw mat beside a cow whose snoring might have been the loudest thing in your one-room shack. The cow is not your pet, it's heating. This is your home, a croft if you're lucky. Stone walls smeared with peat to keep out drafts, a low thatched roof, and a single fire pit in the middle of the room. No chimney though, that's not a thing yet. So the entire room is filled with smoke from the damp peat you burned all night, and now your lungs wheeze like an old accordion. Historians still argue whether early Scottish crofters deliberately shared living space with their animals for warmth, or just lacked separate structures entirely. Either way, the result's the same. You share your bed with fleas, your air with manure, and your walls with drafts that feel suspiciously like betrayal. The air tastes like smoke and sour milk. Your eyes burn. You cough into your elbow and remember, there is no soap. Your elbow is not better than your hand. Everything is equally filthy. At least there's breakfast. A bowl of cold porridge that's crusted at the edges and smells faintly of goat. You gnaw it down without complaint. Hunger is worse than taste. Outdoors, the wind immediately slaps your face like a debt collector. It howls through the glen, tugging your coarse woolen tunic, woven by your own calloused hands or someone else's exhausted wife. You own exactly two garments. One's on you, one's somewhere in the wash basin, which froze overnight. You pass a neighbor hauling a bucket of water from the burn. He grunts. That's as friendly as it gets around here. People don't waste warmth on conversation. You might be fighting over grazing land tomorrow. On the hillside, sheep bleat discontentedly in the mist. You squint. Are those your sheep or McTavish? The line is blurry. So is the concept of ownership. It's 1290-something, dates are loose, and borders are too. Everyone claims everyone else's land, and you never really know if someone's greeting you or measuring you for a shallow grave. A sharp noise rings out, a horn maybe, or a scream. Either way you tense, you're always tensing. Raids are constant and news travels slow. There's no Twitter here, just rumors passed from fire to fire, often wrong, often terrifying. Someone saw English soldiers near the border, someone else saw a demon. Both are probably real, both might kill you. Your feet ache from yesterday's walk to the nearest market, 10 miles of mud and suspicious looks. You traded 2 eggs and a rough spindle of wool for half a turnip and a single iron nail. You treasure that nail. You hide it under your mattress. Not that anyone can steal it without waking your cow. And still, through it all, you press on, because that's what people do here. They endure. Every gust of wind, every wet shoe, every broken tooth that rots in your jaw until it infects your bloodstream, you take it. You absorb it. You become it. Here's a fun fact to sprinkle in your thoughts as you sip that imaginary nightcap. Medieval Scots sometimes used dried animal dung as both fuel and insulation. Yep, dung walls. Cozy. Some folks like to imagine the past as a noble era. Men in shining armor, ladies in long gowns, castles on hills. But for you, none of that is visible. The nearest castle is a half-day's walk and exists mostly to remind you that you owe taxes. The nobility might as well be aliens. But every once in a while, on a clear night, you step outside your shack and look up. The sky is full of stars. No smoke, no light pollution. Just endless black velvet scattered with ancient, icy light. It feels like a quiet miracle. A reminder that somewhere out there, life might be different. Then your cow farts, and the moment is gone. Morning rolls on, but there's no coffee to greet it, no hot shower to shake the chill from your bones. Just the same wet wool against your skin and a pile of chores that stretch from now until dark. You don't really get weekends in medieval Scotland. The land doesn't care that you're tired. The pigs certainly don't. You trudge back inside, nose running, fingers stiff. Your cow has chewed something it shouldn't again, probably part of your only broom. She moos like it's your fault. You sigh and pat her anyway. You'll need her for milk, and if things get truly dire, you'll need her for more than that. The structure around you isn't really a house. It's more like a desperate experiment in keeping cold air slightly farther from your skin. The roof leaks. The door creaks. There are no windows, just square holes stuffed with thatch or wood planks when the weather's too cruel. You don't even have hinges. That door swings on loops of leather, which squeal like tortured mice every time you use them. And you're never alone. Always someone sharing your space. A sibling, your parents, maybe two grandparents who wheeze in a dark corner like living fossils. Oh, and livestock. Always the livestock. If it breathes, it belongs inside, because outside means death by cold or theft or wolves. Maybe all three. There's no such thing as privacy. Want to argue with your spouse? Everyone hears. Want to sob quietly after finding frostbite on your toe? The chickens will judge you. They always do. Historians still argue whether the lack of private space contributed to the intensely communal, and sometimes violently territorial, culture of the Highlands. But you don't have time for sociological musings. You're trying to relight your fire using damp moss and a flint that's been more decorative than useful. You finally get it going, smoke rolling like an angry fog through the room. It stings your eyes and clings to your clothes. Everything smells like smoke. Your hair, your food, your dreams. You don't even notice anymore. You're too busy trying to keep the flames from going out again. Fun tidbit. The average Highland crofter only had one central hearth and rarely used chimneys until well into the post-medieval period. Instead, the smoke just kind of existed with you, marinating you like an unwilling piece of jerky. You poke at the pot hanging over the flames. It holds something that might be stew, or at least what passes for it. Barley, limp carrots, maybe a sliver of fatty mutton if someone was feeling generous last week. You sniff. Questionable. You eat it anyway. Outside, the village groans to life. A few low huts like your own. A blacksmith's shed made of smoke and shouting. A tiny chapel that doubles as the local gossip hub. And lots of mud. Always the mud. It sticks to your shoes, your clothes, your dog, who is mostly ribs and bark. You gave him a name once. Now you just call him Dog and hope he doesn't turn on you if things get rough. Your neighbors emerge too, clutching buckets and tools and baskets of disappointment. You nod. That's all the interaction you need. No one's especially friendly because friendliness doesn't plow a field. Help comes in the form of silent cooperation and returned favors. You share a roof tile when theirs cracks. They bring you firewood when you're coughing too hard to chop. You start your day's work. Maybe you're a weaver, struggling with a crude loom in the dim corner of your hut. Maybe you farm, bending your spine over rocky soil that hates your family and your ancestors and your entire bloodline. Maybe you're that unlucky lad assigned to cleaning out the latrine trench behind the chapel. Yes, that's a thing. And if you're thinking about sanitation, you shouldn't. There's a single well, no soap. You don't even know what a toothbrush is. Bathing happens twice a year, maybe, and only because someone made you. One odd historical note. Early Scottish communities occasionally used straw bedding mixed with heather or even bracken fern to reduce lice. Didn't work, but hey, at least it smelled slightly nicer while you were scratching yourself raw. You pause mid-task to shake the stiffness from your hands. Your joints ache like you're 80, even if you're only 25. That's considered middle-aged here. You know people who were born, farmed, married, buried, all within shouting distance of the same stone wall. Sometimes you fantasize about leaving, going south, maybe to Edinburgh if it even exists yet in your mental map. But that's risky. Travel is dangerous, and besides, you owe your laird 4 sacks of oats by next harvest. Also, you don't really know how to go anywhere. There are no maps, no signs, and no guarantees you'll find food between here and there. So you stay, you chop, you haul, you dig. You fix the holes in the roof when it rains, and it always rains. And at night, when you finally curl up beside your snoring cow and your flea-riddled siblings, you listen to the distant howls of wolves or men or both. And you think tomorrow might be worse. But you sleep anyway, because what else is there? By now, your stomach is doing that hollow, uncomfortable flip-flop it does every day before noon. Not because you skipped breakfast, but because breakfast was 2 spoonfuls of cold porridge and a dream. You think about food constantly, not like a modern craving, no scrolling through pictures of fancy burgers or sushi. You just want anything edible that doesn't taste like yesterday's boots. So you look around. There's some barley in the corner, a sack of oats half devoured by mice, and a turnip that's been lying very still for suspiciously long. You try not to think about the fact that it's moving slightly. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's the weevils again. Either way, lunch is coming whether you're ready or not. You dig into what could generously be called a stew, a bubbling pot of mystery that's been simmering all morning. It's mostly water with a few generous strands of onion and some specks of something. You tell yourself it's meat. You even close your eyes and pretend it's chicken, but you've probably never tasted chicken unless you've stolen it or seen it at the local lord's feast, behind a line of guards. Welcome to your medieval Scottish diet. You eat what grows around you, and that's mostly oats. Oats boiled into gruel. Oats baked into flat cakes. Oats soaked in goat milk and left to ferment until you question your will to live. The only thing you have more of than oats is complaints about oats. Historians agree the peasant diet in medieval Scotland was dominated by grains, especially barley and oats, due to the harsh climate, short growing seasons, and poor soil quality. Vegetables like leeks, onions, and turnips made the occasional appearance, but fruit, that was basically mythical. Meat, rare, very rare. It's not that you don't have animals, you do. You just can't afford to eat them. A chicken gives eggs, a cow gives milk, a pig can breed more pigs. Eating your livestock is like eating your savings account, so you hold out. Maybe one day one of them will die naturally, and when it does, stew night. You swallow your lunch and immediately regret it. The taste isn't terrible, it's just deeply, existentially sad. Like it's been passed through 5 generations of hopelessness. There's a bitter tang that suggests either mold, despair, or both. You sip some ale, not because it's a party, but because it's safer than water. Your local stream is filled with things that make your insides scream. Ale, even weak, small ale, is boiled during brewing. It kills things. That makes it valuable, also slightly addictive. Some villagers start their day with it, end their day with it, and survive their day because of it. The ale's flat and warm, but you drink it like it's holy. And then you chew a piece of hard cheese that was probably made last season. It tastes like socks and salt. You nibble it slowly, very slowly. You don't know when you'll get more. Sometimes, if there's a fair nearby, or if you risk a journey into town, you might trade for better food. A rare sweet treat, maybe dried fish from the coast or a slice of honeycomb if the bees haven't gone on strike this season. Fringe fact: some Highland communities in dire times turn to survival foods like boiled tree bark or dock leaves. Not a joke, not delicious, just desperate. But even that sounds dreamy compared to what's in front of you now. You poke your stew with a wooden spoon you carved yourself. It's got a crack down the middle and might be leaking flavor into the pot, or absorbing it. It's hard to tell. You look at your family. Everyone eats quietly, slurping, chewing, licking fingers clean. There's no waste. Every crust is devoured, every bone sucked dry. The baby chews on a rock. No one stops her. It's probably safer than the stew. Historians still debate whether malnutrition in the Highlands was primarily due to lack of food or unequal food distribution enforced by the feudal system. Either way, your ribs are starting to show, and you don't have time to blame an economic theory when you're hungry now. Dinner comes eventually. It's a repeat of lunch, slightly reheated, slightly more disappointing. You eat by firelight, seated on a low stool beside your cow. She moos again. You moo back. That's the most conversation you've had today. Afterward, you rinse your bowl with cold water from a bucket outside. It's full of floating bits and maybe a bug or two. You tell yourself it adds protein. Then you hang your bowl on a peg beside the wall. It's the only bowl you own. You guard it with your life. As you curl into your straw bedding again that night, belly half full and head full of dreams about bread with butter, real butter, you think back to a happier time, when food tasted like something and didn't fight back in your stomach. Then you sneeze, hard, and remember you're getting sick. But that's for tomorrow. The moment you open your eyes, you feel it. The ache in your joints, the dull throb behind your eyes, the scratchy tightness in your throat. Congratulations, you've caught something. Again. You lie still for a moment, listening to the wind scream against the walls of your croft. It's relentless. A wet, icy kind of cold that seems to have fingers. You try pulling the rough wool blanket higher, but it's already curled around your knees like a lazy ferret, barely clinging to warmth. Outside, the sun hasn't fully risen. Not that it matters. Winter in medieval Scotland isn't marked by the clock, it's marked by survival. The days are short, the nights are long, and everything in between is just a blur of shivering and muttering. Winter isn't a season here, it's an ordeal. You get up anyway, you have to. Even in illness, your animals need feeding, your fire needs stoking, and your roof, well, it's leaking again. A soft drip of icy water lands on your head. You take it personally. You pull on your second layer of clothing. It's damp. Of course it is. Everything is. The hearth fire has gone out overnight, and now your hands are turning pink as you fumble with kindling. You strike the flint 3, 4, 5 times. Finally, a spark. It catches the moss, and soon, smoke is curling up again into the dark, smoky ceiling where soot lives in thick, velvety curtains. You're not sure if your headache is from the fever, or just breathing in your own indoor bonfire again. Historians still argue whether medieval Scottish peasants genuinely adapted to constant smoke exposure, or simply suffered chronic respiratory issues from birth to grave. Judging by your lungs this morning, it's probably the latter. You push open the door. It sticks. Frozen. You shove harder and it creaks open with a loud groan, revealing a world gone white. Snow covers everything. The fields are blank. The road, such as it is, has vanished. The chickens look offended. The pig refuses to come out of its shelter. Smart pig. Your boots crunch into snow as you shuffle across the yard. It's not just the cold that gets to you, it's the damp. Always damp. Moisture creeps into everything, your clothes, your bedding, your bones. You'd set something out to dry, but where? The air inside is wet from smoke. The air outside is wet from snow. Even your shadow feels soggy. You grab the water bucket. It's frozen solid. You chip at the top with a stick. The stick breaks. You sigh and head toward the stream where you'll have to break through the ice again. If you're lucky, you won't fall in this time. On the way, you slip once, catch yourself, then slip again and land on your backside. A new pain joins your growing collection. You groan and mutter something unkind to the sky. There's no such thing as snowplows, of course. No salted roads. Just the natural chaos of winter covering everything in a frigid blanket of unpredictability. Crops, dead, animals, miserable humans, questioning their life choices. Fun tidbit. In the Highlands, snow wasn't just annoying. It could trap entire communities for weeks, cutting them off from trade, travel, or help. People relied heavily on preserved food. Salted meat, dried oats, smoked fish, assuming they had the foresight and storage to make that happen. You didn't. Back home, your family huddles around the fire. One child coughs like a broken flute. Grandma mutters about the chill taking her husband. You're not sure which husband she means. Possibly one of the cows. You're too cold to ask. Even your candle supply is low. You use rushlights, dried reeds dipped in animal fat. They burn quickly and smell worse than the stew. Tonight, you'll probably go to bed the moment the sun dips below the hills. Not because you're tired, but because darkness here isn't romantic. It's just impossible. The cold affects everything. You walk slower, you talk less. You move through the day like you're wadding through a slushy graveyard. Fingers go numb. Toes stop feeling real. You check them more often than usual just to make sure they're still attached. One fringe practice in medieval Scottish households was keeping embers alive in peat overnight under ashes, a trick passed down for generations. If you let the fire die, it could take hours and a lot of precious effort to get it going again. Some even carried coals between houses inside hollowed horns or metal boxes. You wish you had one. Instead, you warm your hands near the hearth, watching sparks dance like ghosts. You almost laugh, almost. There's not much to do in winter other than wait. You mend tools, fix clothes, and spin yarn if your fingers aren't too stiff. Children practice carving little wooden animals or playing quiet games with pebbles. You can hear one now, tapping stones against the hearth, whispering to herself. It's oddly comforting. Sometimes your neighbors gather to share news, music, or stories. You bundle up and walk to a nearby croft. Everyone crams in like sheep. One man has a fiddle with only 3 strings and he plays it like it's a sacred relic. It squeals, but it's beautiful in its own way. Someone tells a tale of selkies, mysterious sea creatures that shed their skins and walk as humans. You've heard it before, but you listen anyway. It distracts you from the chill gnawing at your spine. Historians still debate how much of Highland oral tradition preserved actual history versus allegory or pure fantasy. But when you're trapped in a snow-covered hut with nothing but turnip stew and your own thoughts, selkies start sounding pretty believable. You walk home under a low gray sky. Snow falls softly, fat flakes landing on your hair and shoulders like the gentlest slap you've ever received. The road is gone again. You navigate by instinct, by habit, by prayer. And when you finally close your creaking door behind you, shake off the cold and crawl back into your damp bedding beside your cow and the fire, you do something strange. You smile. Because somehow, you made it through another day of medieval Scottish winter. Barely. By now, the cold has moved into your soul like an uninvited tenant. But it's not just the cold that follows you around like a soggy cloak, it's the smell. Or rather, the collection of smells. You wake to it. You breathe it in. You try not to identify it. Because when your entire life happens in a one-room peat-smoked cow closet, the line between homey and horrific is blurry. Let's begin with you. Your body, to be specific, you haven't bathed in. Well, does washing your hands in the stream count? Probably not. You wipe your face with a damp cloth more out of ritual than real effect. Your hair feels like straw. Your fingernails are full of mystery. Your armpits have their own personality now. And the thing is, you're not alone in this. No one bathes. No one smells good. The village priest, ripe. The baker's wife. She's basically a walking onion. Even your local noble, swishing around in imported linen, smells like old wool and repressed regret. Why? Well, bathing is complicated. For starters, warm water is a luxury. Heating it takes time and fuel you don't have. More importantly, some religious voices preach that too much cleanliness is sinful. Yep, clean skin might make you too proud or too vain. Better to stay humble and itchy. Historians still argue whether this aversion to bathing was more religious or practical, but in your case, it doesn't really matter. You smell like sheep, smoke, and existential despair, and so does everyone else. Soap exists technically. You've seen it. Lye mixed with animal fat, boiled into a sad, crumbly brick that smells faintly of doom. It stings like betrayal and turns your hands redder than your cheeks on a windy morning. You use it sparingly, maybe once a season when the lice become philosophical. Oh yes, the lice, and the fleas, and the ticks, you can't win. Even if you do wash your hair cold water, no shampoo, just vigorous scratching, you'll find those tiny beasts again within a day. You've given up. They live here too now, rent-free. Some fringe communities tried herbal cures. Bundles of lavender, juniper, or mint hung from rafters, worn in satchels, or even burned as crude air fresheners. You tried mint once. The cow ate it. But it's not just you. Your home smells like a barn, and not by accident. There's dung in the straw bedding. There's peat smoke in the walls. There's old milk in the corner bucket, possibly plotting something. You step outside for a breath of fresh air. It doesn't help. The village itself is a symphony of scents. Manure in the fields. Tanned hides drying in the wind. Someone boiling cabbage again. Why is it always cabbage? Even your clothes have turned against you. You wear the same tunic day after day. Washing it means soaking it in cold water, scrubbing it on a rock, and then waiting 3 days for it to dry stiffly in the smoky air. You did that once, never again. Underneath your shirt, made of coarse wool or linen, scratchy enough to make you question the meaning of comfort. Some people wear undergarments made from flax. Not you. You're still saving up for a second pair of socks. Historians still discuss whether medieval Highlanders layered for warmth or simply endured the cold. Based on your experience, it's a mix of both. Layer what you can, suffer the rest. Shoes, you have leather boots, barely held together with twine and faith. They soak through instantly in the marshy soil. Drying them is a multi-day event that usually involves fire, prayer, and a few splinters. You haven't even started on the smell of others. The crowded church on Sunday is a scent gauntlet. People cram together, whispering psalms and sweating under wool cloaks. You hold your breath during prayers and inhale during hymns. Even the holy water looks like it's considering walking away. One quirky tradition you've noticed: the occasional use of herbs tucked into collars or sleeves, sort of medieval deodorant. Sage, rosemary. Not always available, but it makes people smell slightly more like soup and slightly less like despair. There's also the seasonal stink. Summer, sweat, rotting fish, boiled greens left too long in the sun. Winter, smoke, mold, wet wool, coughs with odors you can't describe politely. You laugh sometimes, quietly, thinking about the future. About people who complain about their gym shoes or how public transit smells after rain. If only they could spend a single hour here. They'd thank their scented body wash and air-conditioned offices like they were divine gifts. And yet you've adapted. The nose, it turns out, is merciful. You barely register the stink anymore. You walk through clouds of it like fog. Your brain has decided survival matters more than comfort. Besides, everyone smells the same, which is oddly democratic. Even in the worst of it, when your boots are soaked, your shirt itches, and you've got something suspicious crawling near your collarbone, you find strange moments of peace. A breath of fresh wind across the moors, the brief comfort of hot soup, the shared laughter when someone accidentally steps in the latrine trench. Again. It's not glamorous, it's not poetic, but it's yours. And that somehow is enough to carry you one more day forward. You wake up feeling worse than usual, which is impressive, considering the bar's already ankle high. Your throat is on fire, your joints feel like they've been twisted by a mischievous spirit, and you're sweating through your blanket, which, ironically, is still somehow freezing. You're sick, properly sick. And in medieval Scotland, that's not just bad news, it's practically a death sentence. There's no doctor to call, no pills to take, no steaming bowl of chicken soup unless one of your hens volunteers herself. You're left with a few local remedies, a lot of prayer, and whatever your grandmother mumbles while shaking a handful of dried moss over your head. You try sitting up, your vision spins. Your cow looks at you sympathetically, or maybe judgmentally, it's hard to tell. Let's review your options. You can ask the village healer for help. She's old, sharp-tongued, and suspiciously fond of slugs. Her treatments range from somewhat logical, a poultice made from honey and herbs, to absolutely unhinged, like placing a warm frog on your chest to absorb the fever. She smells like vinegar and damp moss, and you're pretty sure her hut is held together with dried entrails. Still, she's your best shot, so you send someone, a sibling, a neighbor, the brave chicken, off to get her. In the meantime, you drink water that tastes like metal and bark. You chew on willow bark itself, actually. It's one of the few known pain relievers, used long before aspirin existed. You gag on it, but you feel slightly better afterward. Or maybe you're just too dizzy to notice your own suffering. Historians agree that willow bark, yarrow, and honey were among the more effective traditional treatments. But for every decent cure, there were a dozen experimental ideas. The healer arrives. She squints at you, pokes your forehead, and mutters something about imbalanced humors. Then she hands you a pouch of dried nettles and instructs you to steep it in boiling water, if you can afford to boil water again today. She also checks your breath for death on the tongue. You try not to ask what that means. Now, in a more modern world, you'd rest in bed for a few days. Maybe watch a show, eat popsicles. Here, you've got chores, snow, and a roof that leaks on your face. Rest is a luxury. If your cow goes unfed, you lose milk. If you skip the firewood, you freeze. If you lie down too long, you don't get back up. And yet, you push through. You wrap yourself in 3 cloaks, drag yourself out the door, and spend the day coughing into your elbow while chopping wood that immediately gives you a splinter. Outside, the sickness spreads. Your brother is pale. Your neighbor's baby is listless. A cough echoes from house to house like a haunted bell. Something going around, something bad. Maybe it's just winter fever. Maybe it's dysentery. Maybe it's the plague. You heard about that once, from a traveling monk who stopped to rest and ended up preaching about boils the size of apples and rats that brought death in their teeth. You laughed nervously at the time. You're not laughing now. Fringe fact: during outbreaks, some Scottish communities hung bundles of wild garlic, rowan branches, or foxglove in doorways to ward off spirits or bad air. None of that actually helped, but it made people feel proactive. You try it too, can't hurt. That night you feel worse. Fever rises. Your mouth dries out. You hallucinate a bit. Your cow appears to be telling you bedtime stories in Latin. You wonder briefly if that's a sign of the end. The healer returns with stronger measures. She burns a bundle of herbs over your body and chants. Someone fetches a basin of cold water and you're doused 3 times. Symbolic cleansing, apparently. You just shiver violently and wish you were dead for a minute. Historians still debate whether some of these rituals were purely medicinal, purely spiritual, or somewhere in the blurry middle. Likely, all of the above. When you don't understand germs, you try everything. You lie back half-conscious, wondering what your body will decide overnight. Will it pull through or just not? Because here's the thing, medicine, such as it is a guessing game. There are no microscopes, no antibiotics, no hygiene protocols. People die from toothaches, from diarrhea, from stubbed toes that get infected and never stop swelling. You've seen it happen. A friend caught a bad wind one week and was buried by the next. A cousin sliced her leg while foraging, and despite prayers and poultices, she never woke up again. That's the terrifying part. Illness doesn't build slowly, it strikes like a wolf in the night. And half the time, no one even knows what it was. One day, you're coughing. The next, they're building you a shallow grave behind the chapel, marked with a rock and a few muttered words. But not tonight. Somehow, miraculously, you wake up the next morning still weak but lighter. Your fever has broken. Your cough is still there, but your mind is clear. Your cow is no longer quoting scripture. You made it. You chew your bark, sip your weird nettle tea, and breathe in the familiar scent of smoke, straw, and survival. For now, you're still here. And in medieval Scotland, that's the best medicine of all. Your body may be on the mend, but your comfort is still miles away, mostly because you're wrapped head to toe in what feels like medieval sandpaper. Today's outfit, the same as yesterday, and the day before that, and likely tomorrow too. It starts with your underlayer, a long linen shirt rough against your skin and frayed at the edges. Then comes your tunic made of thick wool itchy enough to make your spine crawl. You've tried scratching. It only makes things worse. The tunic smells like damp goat and smoked mutton. It's not a fashion choice. It's a sentence. You pull on your cloak, fastened with a wooden toggle. It's heavy, weather-worn, and barely wide enough to wrap around your shoulders. You mutter a prayer that the wind doesn't tear it off your back again like it did last week. That was a low moment. And then the hose, thick woolen leggings that somehow manage to sag and pinch at the same time. They're held up by bits of string or twisted leather strips that dig into your thighs like guilt. Your feet, lucky things, are stuffed into rawhide boots that feel like wet cardboard after 5 minutes outside. Historians note that Highland dress was deeply practical. Layered, hand-woven, often dyed with natural materials like heather, alder bark, or lichen. The famous tartans came later. Your clothes are mostly a dull mix of browns and greens, designed to help you disappear into the moors if needed, or just get mistaken for a mossy rock. But it's not the color that's the problem, it's the texture. Everything itches, everything binds, and nothing fits quite right. You inherited this tunic from your uncle, who was shorter and mysteriously rounder. It hangs on you like a droopy tent, sagging in some places, choking in others. One quirky regional tidbit. Some folks in the Highlands used fish oil or mutton fat to soften garments and make them more water-resistant. That's right, your neighbors literally greased their clothes. The smell? Immortal. The waterproofing? Debatable. You try not to think about how your shirt might have been used as a rag before it became your shirt, or how many hands stitched and restitched the cloak. Fabric is precious. Everything gets reused. Even scraps have scraps. You tie a cloth around your head to keep out the cold. It doubles as a sleep rag, a dish towel, and sometimes a bandage. Multifunction is key in a world where your entire wardrobe fits in a single chest, or more accurately, a wooden box with a missing lid. Your clothing is a patchwork of effort and compromise. A rip in your tunic, sewn with coarse thread that scratches worse than the original hole. Lost a boot tie. You repurpose the drawstring from your mother's apron and hope she doesn't notice. Spoiler, she does. Historians still argue whether Highlanders wore undergarments consistently or just let the wind run free beneath their kilts, once kilts even existed in their modern form. But for you, modesty is seasonal. In winter, everything gets covered. In summer, well, sometimes survival means letting your knees say hello. There's no such thing as laundry day, just when it rains hard enough. Washing your clothes means hauling them to the river, beating them against rocks, then dragging them home dripping and half frozen. You remember the last time vividly. It took 4 days for your shirt to dry and 3 minutes for it to start smelling like mildew again. You dream of soft things, cotton, silk, even linen without holes. You heard a traveling noble once had fur-lined boots. Fur, on the inside, that thought alone could make a grown peasant weep. Your neighbors don't look any better. Everyone dresses like they lost a bet. Tunics with uneven hems, cloaks that drag through mud, hose with more patches than fabric. And yet, there's pride in keeping them functional. A well-mended cloak earns more respect than a new one. It says you know how to survive. On feast days, people pull out their best. A cloak with extra trim, a brooch polished with sand, maybe even a pair of shoes without holes. It's rare and impressive until someone steps in sheep dung and the illusion shatters. One cold morning, you wrap yourself in every layer you own. You walk stiffly through the snow, arms barely able to bend. You feel like a badly wrapped sausage. The wind cuts through the seams anyway. You stop for a moment, looking out over the moors, your cloak flapping like a flag of defiance. Despite the discomfort, despite the dampness, despite the constant itch, you've learned to live inside these clothes, to make them yours. Because you don't dress to impress. You dress to endure. And in this world, that's the only fashion that matters. You scratch at the seam of your greasy cloak and glance up the glen, because today is Doomsday, and nothing makes your skin crawl faster than the sight of mounted men picking their way toward your croft with ledgers, spears, and the relaxed entitlement of people who have never hauled frozen water in their lives. Lords, lairds, call them what you like. Somebody owns the land under your muddy boots, and it is not you. You farm it, fence it, weed it, pray over it, and still owe payment for the privilege of not being thrown off. Maybe your family's held this patch for generations under some half-remembered Gaelic rite of kinship, but the latest charter from the big house says different. Now your rent comes due in oats, Labor Days, and 2 pigs you were kind of hopping to eat. Medieval tax season, brought to you by hunger and paperwork you can't read. The steward dismounts. He smells better than you low bar and carries a wax tablet like it's a sword of truth. Behind him ride 2 mailed men whose job is to make sure truth gets paid. You kneel because knees are cheaper than blood. He recites obligations. Cain the produce render, conveth hospitality when the Lord's folk pass through, boon work at harvest, and don't forget merchant if any daughter of yours marries without permission. You try not to look at your sister. She tries not to look at the steward. Mainstream historical fact time, though you're living it. Beginning in the 12th century, Scottish kings, especially David I, spread feudal charters that tied land to service, so tenants rendered grain, livestock, or labor to their superiors in exchange for tenure and protection. Protection in this case means the man with the spear theoretically stabs other raiders first. Theoretically. You lead the steward to your tiny grain store. He pokes, prods, sniffs, and decides half goes up the chain. You mention the bad weather. He mentions arrears. You mention the wolf that took 3 sheep. He mentions forfeiture, negotiation, medieval edition. Remember when your cow ate the mint you were using as deodorant? Yeah, that cow is now best beast, and on the day you die the Lord can claim it as Harriet, death duty. You eye the cow. She eyes you back, not thrilled with estate planning. Quirky tidbit. In some remote districts, obligations could be satisfied with highly specific goods, like butter, as long as a man's arm, dyed cloth, or even fat salmon delivered on saints' days. One elder in your village swears his grandfather once paid rent in live bees. Hard to audit, but entertaining. The steward isn't amused. He wants measure, not folklore. Out comes the standard bushel basket. Yours is smaller, he ignores it. He measures by his basket because power is measured in containers. Grain clatters, your winter shrinks. Labor dues hit next. 3 days at the Lord's domain fields during planting. 3 at harvest plus carting peat to the manor if called. Refuse, and you risk fines you can't pay or worse, distraint. Men arriving to walk off with your tools, your cloak, maybe that precious iron nail you hid under the straw. Suddenly that nail feels less safe than ever. Historians still argue whether the spread of feudal tenure under David's reforms fundamentally replaced older Gaelic tribute networks or mostly relabeled them while tightening elite control. From where you stand, labels change, the taking stays. You sign, well, witness with an X pressed into wax. The steward nods, pockets dues, and casually reminds you tithe to the church is separate. Of course it is. Joke 1. Between the laird, the church, and the weather, you're basically a charitable foundation with chilblains. As they ride off, the village exhales. Someone mutters that paying convith next month will bankrupt them if the Lord brings his full retinue again. Hosting the big man means feeding his dog better than you feed your children. Joke 2. If nobles traveled less, peasants would live longer. You regroup, take stock. Half your oats gone, pigs promised. Labor days owed. You'll stretch what's left with nettles, turnip tops, and optimism fried in peat smoke. At least clothes you can't afford to wash don't count as taxable, yet don't give them ideas. Joke 3. Still, the system isn't only extraction. When raiders sweep the valley or taxes from the king roll downhill, the Lord's men may fight for you. You've seen them drive off cattle thieves once. You've also seen them arrive late and count bodies like they were grain sacks. Your neighbor Ewan schemes to short the measure next year by drying his oats less so they weigh more. Risky. If caught, he'll pay double or lose his strip. If it works, his family eats. In a world where law favors the lettered, peasant cunning is the only hedge fund. At dusk, you sit by the hearth watching sparks drift into the smoky rafters. The pigs snuffle outside, ignorant of their fiscal future. Your sister plates a cord she'll trade toward merchant. She wants to marry the Thatcher's son without bankrupting the family. You promise to help. Maybe the steward will accept labor in place of coin. Maybe he'll take bees. Do we still have bees? Because here's the quiet cruelty. Grain taken today weakens seed for spring. Weak seed means thin harvest. Thin harvest means arrears. Arrears invite collection parties who arrive armed and smiling, indistinguishable from raiders after dark. You've heard stories from the next glen. Tenants slow to render cane woke to torches and drove cattle into the night for assessment. Legal theft wears nicer boots. So you hide a handful of oats in a clay jar under the dung pile. Nobody inventories dung against famine, tax, or whatever armed explanation shows up next. When hoofbeats echo down the valley, you never know. Steward, stranger, or enemy wearing your lord's colors. You pull your cloak tight, smell wool, smoke, and fear, and remind yourself to keep the pigs close, the door barred, and the grain dry. The taking season is never really over. Your back aches before the sun even rises, and you already know, today is going to be one of those days. The kind where the mud never lets go of your boots, the wind bites through your tunic like it's whisper thin, and the only thing standing between you and starvation is a crude wooden plow that's seen better centuries. You trudge out to the field, dragging a worn yoke across your shoulder like a broken promise. Your ox, bless his slow, snorting soul, refuses to hurry, pausing every few steps as though he's contemplating a career change. Maybe monkhood. You loop the harness, pat the ox on the rump, and grip the plow handles. With a grunt, the beast lurches forward and you're yanked into motion, boots squelching deep into soil so wet it might as well be soup. You barely make it 10 steps before a root jerks the blade sideways, almost dislocating your shoulder. Typical. Mainstream historical fact. Farming in medieval Scotland was largely subsistence-based. The heavy plow, or ard, struggled in the stony, uneven Highland soil, so most peasants relied on a mix of light tilling, lazy soil rotation, and divine hope. You're running on grit and rainwater. And don't get romantic about it. This is not some pastoral postcard. This is long hours, bent backs, bleeding hands, and hopping the crop gods aren't in a petty mood this year. Most days you don't even know what hurts more, your fingers or your pride. You pause to chew on some leftover barley bread, hard enough to chip a tooth. You eye the sky, cloudy but not thunderous. Maybe you'll get a few more furrows in before it decides to dump on you. Again. Then there's the weeds. Creeping thistle, nettle, bramble, all seem to grow with supernatural spite. You stab at them with a broken hoe and curse under your breath. Joke 1. Weeds are the only things in medieval Scotland with job security. And even when you do manage to sow something decent, there's no guarantee you'll get to keep it. The steward took half your oats. Birds took the rest. You're left staring at a parched patch of hopeful dirt, wondering what exactly you did in a past life to deserve this. You look over at your neighbor, old Morag, bent double as she pulls stones from her planting patch. She waves weakly, her face more wrinkled than skin, but her spirit somehow still sharper than yours. She claims her secret is boiled nettle soup and yelling at the crows. Seems legit. Quirky tidbit: in some parts of medieval Scotland, people used fish bones as fertilizer, chopped up and mixed into the soil to feed the land. Effective? Maybe. Smelly? Absolutely. The scent alone could summon every fox within a mile. You once mistook a fish-fertilized barley plot for a rotting badger. Mistake you don't repeat. You glance at your own fertilizer. Manure from the cow, peat ash, and crushed seaweed hauled in from the coast by your cousin who now smells like low tide even in winter. But hey, the carrots looked less miserable this year. That's a win. By midday, your arms are jelly. The ox stops to poop in the furrow. You sigh, again. The plow drags sideways, you trip, and down you go, face first into the muck. You lie there for a moment, questioning your life choices. Joke 2. Congratulations, you're now part of the food chain from above and below. You sit up, spit out a mouthful of grass, and carry on, because you have to. Nobody's coming to rescue your harvest. No lord will plow your strip for you. And the land, it doesn't care how tired you are. It just waits. Historians still argue whether communal farming in the Bailey system gave peasants more autonomy than the later enclosed fields. On paper, shared strips offered balance and mutual aid. In reality, when someone slacked, everyone paid. And you always know who's slacking. Looking at you, Donald, that's not resting your back, that's sleeping in the hay pile. In between plowing, you pick rocks. Big ones, stubborn ones that refuse to move unless you bribe them with your spine. You build them into the low walls that divide the field. Dry stacked, wobbly, and always on the verge of collapse, like you. You hum a low song passed down from your gran. A work tune meant to keep rhythm with the ox's steps. It barely works, but it keeps the silence from sinking in too deep. Because if the land is cruel, the stillness is worse. It lets your mind wander. You don't like where it goes. By late afternoon, your arms are numb, your back's locking up, and you've plowed less than half your strip. You make a note to borrow some help from your cousin's sons tomorrow. Payment: 2 turnips and a song. Joke 3. If you can't feed them, entertain them. That's the medieval way. As the sun drops behind the hills, you stagger home, shoulders raw, lips chapped, and boots soaked clean through. You lean the plow against the shed wall, untie the ox, and lead him back to the lean-to. He farts in appreciation. You collapse by the hearth with a mug of lukewarm broth. Your sister gives you a look, part pity, part amusement. She's been weaving wool all day. Her hands look like she's been wrestling thistles. You raise your mug in solidarity. Outside, the wind picks up. A storm's brewing. You know the field will flood again tomorrow. You'll have to start over, again. And yet, as you close your eyes, you see furrows, straight ones, proud ones. You remember the moment the soil gave way cleanly under your blade. That 1 second of victory, small but sweet. Because that's what farming is here, relentless, backbreaking hope. And you somehow still have a little left. You wake to wind howling like a vengeful spirit, rattling the shutters and slipping its icy fingers down your neck. You groan, stretch, and realize, yep, still alive. Just barely. Outside, the world is gray, wet, and indifferent. But you've got chores, so up you go. Again. The storm from last night has turned the yard into a swamp, and the thatch roof into a leaky sieve. You pat down the dripping straw with your sleeve, muttering something unholy under your breath. Rain's the only thing that visits more regularly than the laird's steward. Today's trouble isn't in the fields or the tax rolls. Today, it's hunger. The stores are thin, the winter's still clawing, and there's talk of people chewing bark 3 glens over. You tie your cloak tighter, grab your foraging sack, and head out in search of anything remotely edible. Mainstream historical fact: famine wasn't rare in medieval Scotland, it was expected. Poor harvests, harsh winters, livestock diseases, or just plain bad luck could starve entire communities. Some years, folks called it the dearth or the little hunger. But when it got really bad, no one bothered nomming it. They were too busy looking for roots. You pass Morag's croft. She's boiling something green and suspicious smelling. She waves cheerfully, her teeth stained brown from chewing dry dock leaves. She claims it helps with digestion. You suspect it mostly helps her forget what food's supposed to taste like. The woods are slick and cold. Your boots sink into moss with every step. You scan the undergrowth. Nettles, wild garlic, dandelion greens score. You pick carefully, tossing the edible bits into your sack and ignoring the mud on your fingers. Dirt's basically seasoning at this point. You find some mushrooms growing in a ring, tempting but tricky. Joke 1. Nothing says medieval dinner gamble like playing mushroom roulette. You leave them alone. Last year, Donald's cousin tried that pretty red one and spent 3 days speaking fluent frog. Quirky tidbit: during particularly lean times, people would mix ground up bark, heather roots, or even sawdust into their bread to stretch the flour. The results were about as delicious as they sound, and just as nutritious as chewing your boot. You return home with a pitiful but edible haul. Your sister sighs and sets to boiling everything into a sludge she optimistically calls stew. You know it won't fill you up, but at least it won't kill you. Probably. Later that day, a rider comes through the village. Not a lord's man, this one's thinner, travel-worn, and asking about blighted sheep. You overhear the word murrain and your stomach twists. Livestock disease again. Historians still argue whether outbreaks of disease like the 14th century murrains, livestock plagues, were due to overgrazing, climate change, or poor pasture management. But you know what doesn't care about academic debate? Dead sheep. You check your own pen. Your 2 remaining ewes look dull-eyed and shaky. One has a patch of skin that's gone raw. You touch it. It's warm, too warm. You swear under your breath and wrap her in the only clean scrap of cloth you've got. Not because it'll help, just because it feels like doing something. You remember when the last cow died. The smell stuck around for weeks. You buried it in the rocky patch behind the pig pen and tried not to think about how much you'd lost. It wasn't just milk. It was manure, plow-pulling power, a warm body in the barn. You didn't cry, but your sister did, quietly, behind the shed. Joke 2. Your livestock are like roommates. Messy, expensive, emotionally exhausting, and you'll still cry when they move out. Permanently. As dusk falls, a neighbor comes over. He's thin, nervous, eyes darting. He wants to trade. 3 strips of smoked eel for half a sack of oats. You hesitate, that's seed grain. But hunger is louder than reason. You strike a deal, both of you pretending it's fair. You chew on the eel by the fire. It's tough, salty, and strangely reassuring. You imagine you're eating roast boar with a silver knife, wine in hand. Then your sister snorts and reminds you you're drooling on your tunic. You both laugh, hollow but real, and that's worth something. Later that night, you lie awake. Your stomach growls. You think about the future, if spring comes late, if the blight spreads, if the ox goes lame, too many ifs for one brain. So instead, you think small. You think, tomorrow maybe you'll trap a rabbit. Maybe the rain will let up. Maybe your sister will figure out how to make bark bread not taste like despair. Joke 3. Hope in medieval Scotland is like a squirrel, small, twitchy, and frequently eaten. And yet in all this mess, you still get up. You still gather greens, still light the fire, still laugh at eel jokes. Because when food is scarce, resilience becomes your real diet. It's not glorious, it's not poetic, but it's survival, and tonight that's enough. The sun creeps in through the cracks in your shutters, pale and cold like it's not quite committed to the job. You sit up, muscles groaning, and listen. No wind, no rain, no thunderclaps of hoofbeats bringing bad news. Just the quiet crackle of the hearth and your sister softly snoring under her blanket of woven scraps. You take a deep breath and sigh, a rare quiet morning. But don't get too cozy. Remember that little hamlet a few miles east, burned down last spring. Nobody's sure why bandits, feuds, or just a drunken feud over a pig, but either way, 20 homes gone overnight. That's the kind of peace you get here, the calm before the scream variety. You strap on your boots and decide today's the day for repairs. Your roof's leaking like a gossip with no filter. Half the fence fell in last week when a storm rolled through. And your sister's been insisting that someone fix the door latch that lets in the night air, and whatever four-legged freeloaders come with it. Mainstream historical fact: medieval Scottish homes, especially those of the lower classes, were primarily built with wattle and daub walls, thatched roofs, and earth floors. Cozy if you squint, disaster zones if you blink. Your house leans slightly to the left, like it's tired of standing upright. The roof is made of bundled straw, covered with turf, held down by stones in desperate hope. You climb up and start replacing the thatch, shivering every time a gust reminds you that gravity works faster when your hands are numb. You find a bird's nest between two rafters, complete with a smug little blackbird that chirps at you like you're the intruder. You leave her be. She's probably got a better mortgage than you. Quirky tidbit: some Highlanders stuffed dried heather into the thatch to repel insects. You tried it once, ended up with a nose full of pollen and a bee sting in your ear. Never again. You patch what you can, climb down, and start on the fence. The wood's rotting. Every post snaps like stale oatcakes. You swear softly, PG rated, because your sister's listening, and resolve to haul more logs from the forest tomorrow, which means a whole day dodging wolves and praying your axe doesn't bounce off a knot again. Historians still argue whether domestic life in medieval Scotland was more communal or insular. Sure, you depend on neighbors for help, but you also keep one eye on their sheep, their woodpile, and whether they're eyeing your sister's cloaks a little too admiringly. Cooperation and paranoia, best friends in the medieval psyche. You pause for lunch, cold broth and a lump of yesterday's bread that could double as a projectile weapon. You knock it on the table for fun. Your sister rolls her eyes. You grin. Joke 1. Medieval snacks perfect for sustenance and self-defense. After eating, you fix the door latch. Nothing fancy, just a whittled peg and a loop of cord, but it holds. That's enough. Then there's the loom. Your sister's been weaving cloth for weeks now, trying to finish a bolt for trade, but the shuttle keeps sticking and the yarn keeps fraying. You offer to help. Bad idea. You manage to snap a thread, trip over the frame, and nearly spill ash water all over the dye pot. Joke 2. You're banned from loom duty indefinitely. A victory for textile safety. You go outside instead and stack peat for the fire. Wet peat smokes like a cursed ghost, but dry peat, that's warmth. And warmth is survival. You line the sod bricks carefully under the eaves, hoping the next rain doesn't come too soon, or sideways. In the evening, you haul water from the stream. The bucket handle pinches your fingers and your boots slip on the wet stones. You curse gravity again, and the bucket, and whoever decided clean water needed to be stored at the bottom of a hill. As you return, your neighbor walks by with a sheep under one arm, not over his shoulders, literally under his arm like a furry loaf of bread. He nods. You nod. No words needed. That's peak rural communication. Joke 3. In medieval Scotland, sheep weren't just livestock, they were lifestyle. You end the day cleaning soot from the chimney. It's a thankless job, but one you'd rather do yourself than trust to your little cousin, who once managed to get his head stuck in a bread oven. Don't ask. Up there, looking down at the crooked rooftops and distant hills, you feel something weird. Not fear, not misery, something else. Satisfaction. You look at your patched roof, your tied fence, the faint scent of peat smoke curling from your chimney like a sign of stubborn life. Everything around you is broken, Fragile, crooked, but it's yours, and it's still standing. So are you. You wake up to someone screaming. Not a dramatic, bloody, battle-type scream. More like the high-pitched wail of a child stepping barefoot into a puddle of cold pig droppings, which, given where you live, is not exactly rare. You stumble outside, bleary-eyed and blinking, and there's wee Dougal, your cousin's son, flailing around with one boot on, the other foot soaked, and a look of pure betrayal on his face. He's 6, maybe, possibly 5. You've lost track. It's hard to count birthdays when no one's sure what month it is. Welcome to childhood in medieval Scotland. Cute, occasionally, safe, not remotely. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval times, the concept of childhood as we know it didn't really exist. Kids were treated like small adults as soon as they could walk and carry things. By the age of 7, or earlier, they were expected to help around the house, tend livestock, and even contribute to the family income if possible. Dougal's already got chores. He feeds chickens, herds goats, and sometimes, if he's really lucky, gets to stir the gruel without spilling it. You watch him try to shove the chickens back into the pen with a stick that's clearly shorter than the rooster's temper. You shake your head, step in, before he loses an eye. Later, you watch your sister teach Dougal how to spin wool. He's terrible at it. His fingers are clumsy and he keeps tangling the thread, but she's patient. You remember learning the same way, except you had a different teacher, your mother. She passed when you were 10. Fever, maybe, or just too many winters you never really knew. Historians still argue whether medieval Scottish families were more nurturing than we give them credit for, or if necessity simply hardened everyone. From your view, it's both. Love exists, it's just tangled in survival. Joke 1. The medieval version of a playdate is 2 kids getting stuck in a tree while chasing a chicken, and getting yelled at for losing the chicken. Dougal doesn't have toys. No wooden soldiers, no carved ponies, no dolls with painted faces. What he does have is a rock he's named Muckle, and a stick that doubles as a sword, a fishing rod, and a magic staff. His imagination is doing heavy lifting. One afternoon, you find him and a few other village kids making castles out of mud bricks and bits of old cloth. They've got one kid pretending to be the English invader. That kid is now tied to a post and being pelted with turnip tops. You decide not to intervene. It's historically accurate. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval Scottish children, especially in the Highlands, were fostered to other clans as a political alliance or form of social training. Imagine being 6 and getting packed off to live with strangers who expect you to remember all their names and their grudges. Dougal won't be fostered. His family's too poor, too unimportant. But you wonder sometimes, would he be safer somewhere else? Happier, less likely to end up with frostbite before puberty. Then again, he's strong, tough, and weirdly cheerful. He hums tunelessly as he feeds the goats, and even when he slips on dung again, he just wipes his face with a sleeve and mutters, "Stupid goat," then hugs it. That goat is going to eat his mittens later. You know it. Joke 2. Scottish goats have 2 hobbies, chewing socks and silently judging you. Some days things aren't so funny. One of the girls in the village, Brona, hasn't been seen in a few days. Her mother says she's got the wasting. You know what that means. Pale skin, weak limbs, a fever that won't break. Maybe it's just a cold, maybe it's something worse. The village healer brings by a bundle of herbs wrapped in wool and mutters something about cleansing the blood. You hope it works. You've seen too many tiny graves. And yet life stumbles forward. You watch as a group of boys help repair a broken cart, their laughter louder than their hammering. One of them trips and lands face first in a puddle. He comes up grinning, teeth full of mud. His mother yells from the window that he's not coming inside like that. He responds by diving into the puddle again. Joke 3. The only soap a medieval child respects is a cold stream and a threat. You help Dougal with his goat herding again. You teach him a trick for spotting poison weeds. He tells you the goats already know. They just like watching people panic. Maybe he's not wrong. That night, as the fire crackles low and the wind picks up, you see Dougal curled up near the hearth, wrapped in an old sheepskin. He's snoring softly, fingers still curled like he's clutching a spindle. You drape another scrap of cloth over him. Life is brutal here. Children aren't spared. They work, they bleed, they get cold and hungry and tired. But sometimes in the cracks between the hardship, there's a glimmer of laughter, mischief, resilience. They grow up fast, but they also grow strong. And somehow, despite everything, they keep finding reasons to smile. The wind howls outside like it's auditioning for a ghost story, but inside the cottage, it's warm, barely. You've got the hearth glowing with just enough peat to push back the cold, and your sister is muttering something about hemstitching and how marriage is a trap cleverly disguised as social advancement. She's not wrong. You glance up from sharpening your knife to find her staring into the fire with that far-off look. You know what's coming. She's nearing marrying age, which, in medieval Scotland, basically means she's still a teenager but has all her teeth and a good set of wool cloaks. Mainstream historical fact. Marriage in medieval Scotland was usually a strategic alliance. Families arranged unions to strengthen ties, trade livestock, or end feuds. Romantic love, that's for bards and fools. So naturally, your sister's betrothal was arranged last spring. She met the lad twice. He seemed decent, tall, 2 eyebrows, didn't spit when he talked. High marks all around. But he lives 4 valleys over and his family expects a dowry, 3 goats, 2 sacks of oats, and maybe a cow if you're feeling generous. You're not. Right now, the cow is looking like your most valuable asset. You jokingly offered your left arm instead. Your mother didn't laugh. Quirky tidbit. Some clans measured a bride's value in cows, and the phrase worth a dozen kai. Kai equals cattle was the ultimate compliment. So yes, women were basically walking investment portfolios. Outside, a wedding feast is underway. Not yours, thank the saints. It's young Ruidri and his new bride, Isla, from the neighboring glen. You don't know her well, but you did once see her carry a barrel of ale across a field like it weighed nothing. That's marriage material. The entire village is either drunk, dancing, or trying not to step in something organic. Bagpipes wheeze in the background. Children run wild. A goat has somehow joined the dancing. Joke 1. Nothing says romance like tripping over manure in your nicest tunic. You watch from a distance, chewing on a strip of smoked venison that tastes like salty bark. Your sister sighs. The smell of heather ale and overcooked turnips fills the air. Someone's greytan is already passed out on a hay bale, snoring like a war horn. At the feast, someone tries to initiate you into the dancing circle. You decline with a polite grunt. You know how these things go, spinning too fast, slipping in mud, losing a boot, or worse, catching the eye of a matchmaker. Historians still argue whether Highland marriages were more egalitarian compared to other parts of medieval Europe. Some suggest women held more sway in clan matters and could refuse suitors, especially in smaller communities. Others say that's romanticizing a system that mostly revolved around livestock and land. Your sister pulls you aside later. She's holding the hem of her dress, clearly uncomfortable. Not just because it's itchy homespun wool, but because she's thinking about the future, about leaving home, about marrying someone who might or might not snore like a dying ox. You hand her a honey cake from the table, one of the rare wedding luxuries. It's slightly burnt but sweet. She smiles briefly, then mutters, "Do you think he'll be kind?" You hesitate. That's not a question you can answer. But you say, "If he isn't, I'll walk all 4 valleys and feed him his own boots." It's half a joke, half a promise. She grins, that helps. Back home, you pass the time mending one of her shawls. Your stitches are crooked but warm. She thanks you anyway. Then you both sit in silence, watching the embers settle. Joke 2. In medieval Scotland, you don't swipe right. You barter a sheep and hope for the best. You remember your parents' marriage. Not a love story exactly, but they worked like two hands on the same plow, rough, calloused, never quite touching but going the same direction. It wasn't romance, it was rhythm. Still, on long nights, you'd catch them whispering by the hearth, passing a scrap of bannock between them, laughing softly over something neither of them ever explained. Maybe that's all love needs: shared warmth, shared weariness, shared bannock. The next morning, your sister is gone before sunrise. Off to gather berries, she says. But you know she needs space, needs to walk the hills and scream into the wind where no one hears. You've done it too. By midday, she's back, red-cheeked, silent, but lighter somehow. She drops a pouch of berries on the table and says, "He better not have bad breath." You raise your cup in agreement, to teeth and tolerance. Later that week, a messenger comes bearing gifts: dried fish, a well-woven shawl, a letter with ink smudges. It's from the betrothed. Your sister reads it slowly, smiles, then bursts out laughing. "He tried to write poetry, compared me to a snow-covered mountain goat." You both howl. Marriage might not be romantic, but at least it can be entertaining. Joke 3. If your Highland suitor writes you poetry, double-check it's not a veiled threat or a goat metaphor. So life continues. Courtships come with muddy boots, awkward feasts, and love letters that smell like fish. But sometimes kindness slips through the cracks. In a world where survival is brutal and bartering your future is the norm, you learn to find grace in a mismatched shawl, a joke shared over porridge, or a quiet moment before the dancing begins. And if that's not love, well, it's close enough. You're ankle deep in mud again. Not because it rained, though it did, as always, but because you're trudging through a path that might once have been a road, back when roads were a thing and not just the drier part of the field where fewer sheep poop. You're heading to the market, or rather, the closest thing your scattered hills have to one. A small cluster of tents, carts, and hopeful bartering, all tucked into a grassy clearing that smells like onions, horse sweat, and ambition. Mainstream historical fact: while towns and trade hubs did exist, especially in the lowlands, much of medieval Scotland operated on a local barter economy. Coins were rare, and most people exchanged goods: eggs for cloth, oats for tools, gossip for gossip. You've brought a basket of turnips and 2 bundles of wool, your best offerings. Your sister stitched a small charm into one of them for luck, or maybe to scare off fleas. You're not asking. As you approach the market, the noise hits you first. Sheep bleating, dogs barking, a man yelling about the miraculous properties of his boot polish. You suspect it's just sheep fat. And a kid trying to sell rocks shaped vaguely like saints. You spot a familiar face: Elric the blacksmith. Broad shoulders, beard like a steel brush, permanently grumpy. He's yelling at a lad who just broke a hoe handle in half. Quirky tidbit: Scottish blacksmiths were often considered semi-magical. People believed they held special power because they worked with fire and iron, 2 things you don't mess with lightly. You nod to Elric, trade your turnips for 2 new knife blades, and move on before he ropes you into fixing someone's chicken coop. Again. Next stop, the wool merchant. A wiry woman with sharp eyes and a dog that may or may not be part demon. She inspects your bundles with exaggerated suspicion, sniffing the wool like she's auditioning for a role as human ferret. Eventually she grunts, hands you a small cloth pouch, and mutters something about fair trade. You don't check the contents until you're a safe distance away. 5 brass buttons and a lump of soap. Could have been worse. Joke 1. In medieval Scotland, if you leave the market with all your teeth in your shirt, it's a win. You weave through the crowd, trying not to step on anyone's cloak or dignity. A traveling bard is singing about a heroic stag who saved a village from English raiders by snorting fire. You don't believe it, but the chorus is catchy. Historians still argue whether local markets functioned as true economic centers or more as social glue, places where news, politics, matchmaking, and disputes were just as valuable as the grain and ale. From your vantage point, it's everything rolled into one smelly, shouting mess. You linger near a spice cart, not because you can afford anything, but because it smells like cinnamon and dreams. The vendor offers you a pinch of something reddish-brown. You ask what it is. He grins and says, "Probably not poisonous." You pass. In one corner of the market, two men argue over a sheep. One insists the animal is blessed by Saint Columba. The other points out it only has one eye and limps sideways. The argument ends in a shoving match, followed by applause from the watching crowd. Joke 2. Nothing boosts local commerce like divine livestock and low expectations. You bump into a friend, Tamsin, a weaver's daughter. She's got a ribbon in her hair and a bag full of smoked fish. She offers you one. It smells slightly less offensive than most things around here, so you accept. She tells you about a trader who came last week, offering rare glass beads in exchange for Highland whiskey. Her uncle traded his best bottle. The beads turned out to be dyed snail shells. Her uncle now weeps into turnip soup nightly. You both laugh, chew fish, and people watch in silence for a bit. Then a loud voice booms across the clearing. It's the local bailiff, announcing the market rules as if anyone follows them. No swindling, no fighting, no stealing livestock. You glance over at a boy quietly dragging a goose under his cloak. So much for that. Before you head home, you stop at a stall selling simple leather goods. You trade one of your brass buttons for a sturdy belt pouch. The merchant tosses in a piece of licorice root for chewing to keep the teeth sharp. You don't ask what that means. As you leave, you pass a line of carts headed north. Traders, maybe, or trouble, you never know. The road home feels longer. Your arms ache, your boots are soaked, and your stomach growls with the kind of hunger that dreams of meat. But you're richer in blades, buttons, soap, and that slightly terrifying pouch. Not bad. Joke 3. Medieval shopping lists read like riddles. Get eggs, twine, and something to ward off curses. When you finally reach your cottage, the fire's still burning and your sister's humming as she stirs a pot. You toss the pouch on the table with a dramatic sigh. She opens it, sniffs, and says, "This better be soap and not another cursed rock." You shrug 50-50. Life here doesn't revolve around gold coins or royal decrees. It moves in trade of goods, favors, stories. The market's chaos is its rhythm. Noisy, messy, smelly, and full of small wins. And somehow, even in this mud-drenched economy, you've managed to come home with what matters. Warmth, tools, a decent story to tell, and your boots still on your feet. By the time you drag the bucket from the well, your arms feel like ropes strung too tight. The water sloshes, cold enough to bite your fingers, and as you carry it inside, your breath fogs the air. Summer left days ago without saying goodbye. Again. Your sister's curled up near the fire, hands wrapped around a cup of oat broth. The kind that sticks to your ribs but not your memory. You set the water down and poke at the flames. Sparks snap like tiny tempers. You're not really warming your hands, you're stalling. Today, you're supposed to help reinforce the thatch roof on the west side. And by reinforce, you mean climb onto a slippery wooden ladder, lean over an angle that defies good sense, and pray the wind doesn't suddenly remember it's Scottish. Mainstream historical fact. Most Highland homes in medieval Scotland were made of wattle and daub walls, thatched roofs, and earthen floors. Durable enough to survive storms, barely. But cozy, not so much. You climb anyway, because if you don't, rain coming for your bed. And no one sleeps well with dripping moss above their face. Outside, the wind wrestles your cloak as you grip the ladder, knees wobbling, one arm full of straw and peat rope. The old roof groans when you touch it, like it resents your intrusion. You work in silence. Well, except for the occasional muttered curse when straw pokes your eye or your fingers slip. Your neighbor, Hamish, passes by with his cart full of dung and yells up, "Don't fall. You'll break the ladder." Not you, the ladder. Joke 1. Highland friendships are 70% insults, 20% shared tools, and 10% rescuing each other from mud-based disasters. Back inside, you smell something burning. Not a fire, more like wet wool over too much heat. You race down the ladder to find your sister trying to dry a shawl too close to the hearth. You flap it like a flag and toss it outside. She looks guilty, then amused. "Could have smoked it like ham," she jokes. "Start a new fashion." You grunt but laugh too. There's no escaping daily tasks. Cleaning the hearth, checking traps, fixing cloaks, boiling water to soak linen, scraping candle tallow into molds, stirring porridge, sweeping out the bits of yesterday's mess that somehow grew legs overnight. Historians still argue whether rural Highlanders had free time in any meaningful sense. Some claim the long winters allowed for leisure, music, stories, crafts. Others say survival left no room for idleness, even in the coldest months. You think the truth lies somewhere in between. Like now, after chores are done and bellies are half full and the wind finally quiets, you both sit by the fire. She stitches. You sharpen your blade. The silence between you hums soft. Quirky tidbit. Some Highlanders believed certain knots in thread could protect the wearer from misfortune. Others said if you sewed late at night, the fair folk might help or ruin everything. Outside, something rustles. Could be wind. Could be a fox. Could be your cousin drunkenly singing to a tree again. You don't investigate, not your business tonight. Instead, you boil water for tea made from dried heather and mint. Tastes like boiled grass with ambition, but it's warm. Joke 2. If it smells faintly of dirt and regret, congratulations. It's probably Highland herbal tea. You think back to the last storm, when lightning hit the old pine near the glen and split it like firewood. The thunder rolled for hours, so loud you felt it in your ribs. That night, everyone stayed close, telling stories until the fear passed like a fever. You remember how your uncle told the tale of the Selkies, seals who shed their skin to walk as humans, often luring villagers to the sea. "Watch the waves," he warned. "They're listening." You still do. The fire pops. Your sister yawns. You cover the last window slat with an extra blanket to keep the draft out. Tomorrow will come too fast. Joke 3. Medieval mornings are like medieval weather. Unforgiving, damp, and determined to ruin your mood. As you lie down, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep and lavender, your eyes adjust to the dark. You hear the crackling fire, the slow creak of wood settling, and the occasional distant howl of wind, or maybe something less explainable. You close your eyes. And that's when the rhythm settles in, the truth of it. Medieval life in Scotland. It's not just brutal battles and freezing winters, it's a daily grind of survival. Quiet, muddy victories, shared bread, bad jokes, small moments of peace. And somehow, despite the damp floors, the aching bones, and the constant threat of weather, or worse, there's something solid in this life, something real. Outside, the night stretches across the hills like a dark woolen cloak stitched with stars. Even the animals have quieted, the sheep curled in their pens, the dogs snoring softly at doorways. There's no rush now, no chores waiting, no roof to fix. Just the low, steady hum of the hearth and the steady beat of your breath. The fire fades to glowing coals, warm but no longer demanding your attention. The air is cooler now, but your blanket holds the day's warmth. It smells of home, of peat smoke, wool, and a trace of sweet mint from that strange little tea you drank earlier. You shift slightly, listening to your sister's quiet breathing from the corner. The cottage is still, as if the very stones have exhaled. Tomorrow will bring new work, new noise, new mud, but not yet, not now. You've done enough for one day. You've bargained and built, stitched and stirred, climbed and carried. You've laughed more than you meant to. And that perhaps is the greatest triumph of all in a place like this. Your muscles begin to soften, your thoughts stretch and yawn. Let them wander, let them blur. The wind may howl again tomorrow, but for now, it's just a lullaby in the distance. Let it sing. Let it all fade. Let it go. Sweet dreams.